Hello. Welcome once again to a morning reading of My Life with the Spirits. Uh, Yesterday, I talked a little bit about when we moved to Oregon with Carl and Elsa and their family, and we were Oregon hippies for a while. Uh, if you'll look on my Facebook page, probably the posting right below this uh, video today, you'll see the Life magazine cover of Carl and Elsa and their family. Those are the people we moved to Oregon with. So I thought I'd share that part too. Today we're on, as I say, chapter 10, which is called Rock and Roll Rosicrucian. The time we spent in Oregon was the golden age of hippiedom. We were surrounded by hardcore spiritual seekers, yogis, Buddhists, and devotional Christians. God was the centerpiece of every conversation, every meal, every diversion, and pleasure. We were like an Amish community, only with a perverse sense of humor, a love of music and bright colors, and raging libidos. With expert help from our talented hippie neighbors, we completed Mark and Margaret's house in early September and laid out plans to build another for Constance and me. As we were nearly out of money, we decided to return briefly to Southern California and raise the needed funds. I was sure I'd be able to find work singing, and if all went well, we'd be back in Oregon in 2 or 3 weeks. As it turned out, things went extremely well. The first day back, I joined my old songwriting partner, Charlie Harris, who had secured a marvelous gig at one of the better Newport Beach eateries. He negotiated more money from the club and generously allowed me to share the stage. And there's a picture of Charlie and me. Charlie and I were pretty good. The fact that we wrote many of the songs we performed made our cabaret act somewhat of an aberration. We sang 5 nights a week, and by the end of the second week, I had earned the fabled grub stake. We packed up the old VW bus and readied ourselves for our triumphant return to Oregon. We planned to depart immediately after my last Saturday night performance. As it turned out, we did not leave that night, nor would we ever return to our land. It happened that Charlie and I had an old drinking buddy who had recently bought into the music business. He chanced to team up with a seasoned producer from Columbia Records, and together they shepherded their client to 2 #1 hits in less than 90 days. And I'll pause here and parenthetically tell you that the act that they handled was The Spiral Staircase, that had 2 #1 hits in those days. I Love You More Today Than Yesterday. It was those guys. My friend and the producer, their stock in the industry was at its zenith, and for some reason they chose that night to get drunk and listen to Charlie and me. They liked our original songs and asked if we had written any others. Charlie lied and boasted that we had hundreds of songs. Hearing this, they asked if we'd be willing to record a demo. Neither Charlie nor I actually thought this was anything other than Hollywood hype, but I agreed to stay another week to see if they would deliver. They delivered, and more. 2 days later, we drove to Sunset Boulevard and recorded a few original songs in historic Studio A at CBS. Within the week, we signed to record 2 singles and an album on the Epic label. Joined the obligatory unions and signed with the William Morris Agency. We've got a footnote here. We called ourselves Charlie D and Milo. Our first single on Epic label was Back Bay Blue. Our album, that album right there, was simply called Charlie D and Milo. It did remarkably well everywhere it was distributed. It even earned a Billboard magazine's spotlight pick and received good reviews. Our second single, The Word Is Love, went to number 1 in a handful of cities where distribution enabled it to be broadcast and purchased. Salt Lake City was one such city, and the highlight of our concert visit to that fair city was hearing it played on 2 AM stations simultaneously. It was an adolescent's dream come true. Charlie and I and everyone who knew us were stunned. It was now our turn to deliver on all those songs we said that we'd written. Realizing we were philosophical lightweights and with very little to say, we nonetheless chose to take the high road and channel the themes for our songs by flipping through the pages of an occult dictionary and picking a word or phrase at random. We wrote of sylphs and gnomes and undines and white goose feet. We thought it was all heavy. Even our publisher got caught up in our magic and renamed his company Hazel Wand Publishing. For the next 4 years, Charlie and I played, sometimes quite successfully, at being recording artists and musicians. We traveled everywhere our songs received radio play, and we were the opening act for far more recognizable names. A few of our songs were picked up and recorded by other groups, and we garnered more than our share of collateral studio work. And the footnote says, 1960s recording star Johnny Rivers saw us perform and liked our song Moving to the Country. So much that he recorded it on his next album, Homegrown. You can still get that too. Charlie and I and our lead guitarist joined him on the session. About the same time I really went Hollywood, after I was accidentally accepted at the Lee Strasberg Film and Theatrical Institute. For over a year, I was inexplicably privileged to study with that great master and his team of unforgettable character actors. Predictably, Charlie and I fell prey to the excesses that accompanied such lifestyles in the early 70s. And it became more and more obvious that I was soon going to have to make a decision as my future as a holy man. In spite of the craziness, Constance and I decided we wanted a baby. Our son, Jean-Paul, was born toward the end of this wild and unhealthy season of my life. His arrival made it clear that the stable world of a hippie musician was not conducive to family life. I decided to get out of the business and take my chances in the real world. For the next 10 years or so, I didn't do a very good job of it. While trying to figure out what I wanted to do when I grew up, my brother Mark encouraged me to join him in the Rosicrucian Order Amorc, A-M-O-R-C. He said they were like mystic Freemasons. I took his advice, and with the United States Postal Service as my psychopomp, I took the first initiatory step into the Western mysteries. My employment and financial difficulties would not get better for a long time, but my spiritual life was about to explode. And that's the end of chapter 10. I hope to see you all tomorrow. Be good to yourself. Be good to each other. Stay safe. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law. Love under will.